On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle. Hope everybody out there is having themselves a great day. Got a bunch more Q posts coming up. I'm just baffled right now as to how there can still be a lot of question as to which candidate makes the best choice. But again, we're going to kind of go through some of the evidence that's out there. We're going to talk about some of the key stories that are getting play on the New York Post, the Washington Post, and Fox did a really good segment that we're going to share with you last night. Again, Joe Biden said something very strange in yesterday's town hall. We're going to play that here in just a second. Trump really held his own. I mean, he was basically having to debate the moderator is what it seemed like, but his answers were good. They were compelling. I think a couple places maybe he could have hit home a couple more points, but for the most part, again, I think Trump looked outstanding. Biden didn't look bad by chance. I mean, there's a couple questions he didn't really ask. They certainly didn't ask him anything about his son or any of that. So from a softball standpoint, yeah, he did pretty good. I mean, as it finds out, I've got an article that shows that a couple of the people that were in the audience asking questions were actually friendly people, and we'll get into some of that too. So the thing that came up yesterday, and this is really just an interesting matter. I'm going to go ahead and let the quote speak for itself, and then we'll go from there.
The idea that an 8-year-old child or a 10-year-old child decides, I decided I want to be transgender. That's what I think I'd like to be. It'll make my life a lot easier. There should be zero discrimination. And what's happening...
An 8 or a 10-year-old child deciding what their sexuality will be. Now, to my understanding, I'm not a doctor, but to my understanding, and certainly from a lot of the friends I have that are of the alternative sex, and I'm very cool with that. I've been in theater and drama and stuff my whole life, so very cool with that. I got no qualms about anyone's sexuality. You can do whatever you like. You can be with whoever you like. I think that's wonderful. But an 8 and 10-year-olds are too young to, one, decide what they're going to have for dinner, too young to decide whether or not they should have candy before dinner, right? Isn't this why parents have to make decisions? Because children aren't at a place to make those decisions yet. Also, when children are prepubescent, they generally speaking haven't really gotten their whole sexuality figured out. It hasn't really gone into play. The hormones haven't totally ramped in like they will or can. So again, this whole idea that an 8 or 10-year-old should be making this decision, I think is strange to a lot of people. I mean, I share that strangeness. I think it's odd to let a child of that age decide what's going to happen, whether there's going to be hormone blockers and a whole slew of things that could drastically alter this child's life, could alter their experience from other people. And to Biden's point, they should never be like picked on or anything. That's never okay. Never. It's never okay to pick on people, harm people, hurt people. None of that's okay. But it does seem really strange to have them decide at such an early age. Post 4876, where we left off, we've got this Washington Times Twitter post. Hunter Biden demanded the Chinese billionaire pay $10 million for introductions alone. This is a new story that has come out now from the Washington Times. Sorry, I said Washington Post earlier, the Washington Times. Hunter Biden demanded that this Chinese billionaire apparently pay him $10 million for introductions. He was receiving a $10 million annual fee from this Chinese billionaire who apparently shouldn't be a surprise to a lot of people, but he has been accused of corruption. I don't know if it's necessarily gone and been, all the way, but he has been accused, and certainly he sought to increase his cash flow with a joint business ownership, and there's an email from Biden that is showing that the money was for introductions alone, said Mr. Biden, son of Democrat President nominee Joseph R. Biden. Another email to Hunter Biden from a consultant says that a 10% stake in an unnamed company will go to the big guy, and the big guy was not identified. And there was also a guy named Jim identified in that. Again, we don't know who these people are. One of the most important things I want to go on record again saying is the FBI supposedly has these emails, has this information, and is supposedly, hopefully, going to let us know whether they're legitimate or not. Now, Christopher Wray, I've got not a lot of faith in. We'll see, the head of the FBI. Not sure how that's going to play out. Obviously, because it's not happening fast enough, is my guess, it seems that these things are leaking out from Giuliani and other sources. Now, right, wrong, and different, we can debate that all day long. Whatever the case is, information is coming out. Information's coming out that suggests that the individual, the president, the vice president at the time, who was in charge of the anti-corruption dealings in Ukraine, seemed to have his son involved with some very corrupt things that were going on. In fact, when we get to the Tucker Carlson video, which is coming up here shortly, and it's certainly worth the watch, there is some great information in there. But as we'll find out, or as it seems, there seemed to be some corruption going on with Hunter Biden. Whether Joe knew about it or not, again, that's the big question. There's evidence. Again, we're looking to prove this evidence is legit, but there's supposedly evidence that suggests that Joe did know. Joe Biden did know what his son was doing. So again, a lot of things are coming out. Obviously, 18 days before the election is questionable too. Let's be honest. But this is the stuff that's happening. This, by the way, is exactly what happened in 2016 as well, right? Hillary Clinton, the email stuff, Trump was pushing that, and she lost. And they kind of blamed that whole thing on why she lost. I think there's other factors. I mean, I think people really just did not like Hillary. I think she came across kind of, I don't know, to other people, she kind of came across a little snobby, a little mean maybe. I don't know, just I didn't get that genuine feeling that I tend to get with Trump. I certainly feel like that with Pence. When Pence talks, I feel like he's just like a sweet old man that's just saying really cool stuff. So I don't know. We'll see how this all plays out. This is something we're going to be talking about in the history books for eons. Post 4877, the show has obtained new Hunter Biden emails that expose corruptions, what Tucker Carlson was saying on his tweet. You will not want to miss tonight's report. Tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox News. Now, on the Right Scoop, which is kind of a new source that I've kind of been seeing pop up, but there's some interesting stuff that's happening. But we've got this very cool Tucker Carlson interview down here. 7 minutes, but I'll tell you what, folks, this is a very good, solid 7 minutes that really helps paint out what has been going on, the timing of the firing of that investigator that was investigating Burisma in Ukraine. It gets into the timing of all these things. And again, it's on Fox News, which is a mainstream media. So from the standpoint of me feeling like we can talk about this, here's another source. So Washington Times, New York Post, and Fox News. So let's check out from Eric Trump's post here what we've got on this particular tweet. This is really good stuff.
But not everything you hear is untrue, and not every story is complex. At the heart of the growing Biden-Ukraine scandal, for example, is a very straightforward question. Did Joe Biden subvert American foreign policy in order to enrich his own family? In 2015, Joe Biden was the sitting vice president of the United States. Included in his portfolio were U.S. relations with the nation of Ukraine. So at that moment, Vice President Joe Biden had more influence over the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian economy than any other person on the globe outside of Eastern Europe. Biden's younger son, Hunter, knew that. He hoped to get rich from his father's influence. Emails published yesterday by the New York Post, documents apparently taken directly from Hunter Biden's own laptop, tell some of that story. Tonight, we'd like to bring you some more detail. We have another batch of emails, some exclusive to the show. We believe they also came from Hunter Biden's laptop. We can't prove that they did. We haven't examined that computer. But every detail that we could check, including Hunter Biden's personal email address at the time, suggests they are authentic. As we told you last night, if these emails are fake, this is the most complex and sophisticated hoax in history. It almost seems beyond human capacity. The Biden campaign clearly believes these emails are real. They have not said otherwise. We sent the body of them to Hunter Biden's attorney and never heard back. So with that in mind, here's what we have learned. On November 2nd, 2015 at 4:30 in the afternoon, a Burisma executive called Vadim Pozharsky emailed Hunter Biden and his business partner, Devon Archer. The purpose of the email, Pozharsky explains, is to, quote, be on the same page about our final goals, including but not limited to a concrete course of action. So what did Burisma want exactly? Well, good PR, for starters. The executive wanted, quote, high-ranking U.S. officials to express their, quote, positive opinion of Burisma. And then he wanted the administration to act on Burisma's behalf. Quote, the scope of work should also include organization of a visit of a number of widely recognized and influential current and or former U.S. policymakers to Ukraine in November, aiming to conduct meetings with and bring positive signals and message of support to Burisma. The goal, the executive explained, was to, quote, close down any cases/pursuits against the head of Burisma in Ukraine. So that couldn't be clearer, what they wanted. Burisma wanted Hunter Biden's father to get their company out of legal trouble with the Ukrainian government. And that's exactly what happened. 1 month later to the day, on December 2nd, 2015, Hunter Biden received a notice from a Washington PR firm called Blue Star Strategies. Blue Star Strategies apparently had been hired to lobby the administration on Ukraine. This show has exclusively obtained that email. Hello all, it began. This morning, the White House hosted a conference call regarding the vice president's upcoming trip to Ukraine. Attached is a memo from the Blue Star Strategies team with the minutes of the call, which outlined the trip's agenda and addressed several questions regarding U.S. policy toward Ukraine, end quote. So here you have a PR firm involved in an official White House foreign policy call. How could that happen? Good question, but it worked. Days later, Joe Biden flew to Ukraine and did exactly what his son wanted. The vice president gave a speech slamming the very Ukrainian law enforcement official who was tormenting Burisma, the exact guy. If the Ukrainian government doesn't fire its top prosecutor, a man called Viktor Shokin, Biden explained, the administration withhold $1 billion in American aid. Now, Ukraine is a poor country, so they had no choice but to obey. Biden's bullying worked. He bragged about it later.
I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Now, Joe Biden gave that speech before the Council on Foreign Relations, so we pretend as if what he said was normal and officially authorized. This is how things are done. That's not true at all. This is bizarre. And the amazing thing about the video you just saw is that no one in that audience of Harvard graduates and other assorted smart people asked the glaringly obvious question. Why was the vice president of the United States threatening a tiny country like Ukraine to fire its top prosecutor? That doesn't seem like a vice president's role. Well, now we know why. Viktor Shokin has signed an affidavit affirming that he was, in fact, investigating Burisma at the moment Joe Biden had him removed. Shokin said that before he was fired, administration officials pressured him into dropping the case against Burisma. He would not do that, so Joe Biden canned him. That's how things really work in Washington. Your son's got a lucrative consulting deal with the Ukrainian energy company. You tailor American foreign policy to help make him rich. Our foreign policy. Even at the State Department, possibly the most cynical agency in government, this seemed shockingly brazen. During the impeachment proceedings last fall, a State Department official called George Kent said it was widely known in Washington that the Bidens were up to something sleazy in Ukraine. Quote, I was on a call with somebody on the vice president's staff, and I raised my concerns that I had heard that Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma. This, George Kent noted, could create a perception of a conflict of interest. So how did the vice president's office respond to this concern? Well, according to George Kent, quote, the message that I recall hearing back was that the vice president's son, Beau, was dying of cancer, and there was no further bandwidth to deal with family-related issues at the time. Family-related issues. This was America's foreign policy being tailored to Joe Biden's son. 5 years later, Joe Biden still has not been forced to explain why he fired Ukraine's top prosecutor at precisely the moment his son was being paid to get him to fire Ukraine's top prosecutor. Nor has Joe Biden addressed whether or not he personally benefited from the Burisma contract. But there are tantalizing hints. Last night, former Mayor Rudy Giuliani published what he said was yet another email from Hunter Biden's laptop. It's a note to one of his children. It's sad, and it's fraught, and it's personal, and we're not going to quote it at length. But at the end, there's this, quote, don't worry. Unlike your grandfather, I won't make you give me half your salary. What does that mean exactly? Well, we don't know. There may be more detail in the laptop, but unfortunately we don't have access to that. But the question remains, how has Joe Biden lived in extravagance all these years on a government salary? No one has ever answered that question. But not every...
And likely, no one's ever going to be able to answer that question. No one's pushing him on it. For some reason, it doesn't seem that Joe Biden has to answer those questions. Nobody's asking those questions. And when they do, he throws a little temper tantrum. He gets angry. He puts him down. Come on, man. Like, he says the standard stuff that he's just famous for saying. But he doesn't answer the question. There's a lot of concern around if there was something going on, if there was, in fact, helping family members. That's what a lot of people in this whole movement consider deep state. That's an example of how the deep state works. You help all these individuals that just help each other, and they don't care about the rest of us. They're worried about themselves. It seems that they're worried about themselves more than anybody else. So it's something that a lot of us are very concerned about. Post 4878, again, referencing this same Washington Times story. We've got a pretty cool little post down here, but the thing that's most important is Twitter is over capacity. Please wait a few moments and then try again. We also noticed that Twitter went down. I don't know if they're related, but this is funny. Someone was sharing the screenshot, and then they say, Q, you broke twat. And apparently, Q responded back and said, no, Anon, you did, collectively. Again, where we go one, we go all. One of the joys of being a part of this group of people that are trying to get the truth out. We're trying to talk about the truth. We're trying to make sure that this narrative that's being shared from one side also has this other side of people at least talking about what they think's going on. The narrative from the left, mainstream media and everything else, I mean, how else can we fight back other than trying to find sources, trying to find stories, different things that are coming out and sharing that with you guys? And that's the best that we can do. Now, a great network, I really do like them, and I just actually adore this girl, Rion at OAN, Chanel Rion, I guess, over at OAN. She's awesome. She's one of the people that's in the White House. She often asks those softball questions for Trump, the only reporter that does that. So, again, obviously very skewed to the right, but I mean, again, whoever is. But she says, and I'm being careful with my language these days, there's a lot of questions, but just saw for myself behind the scenes, I will pull it up on here, just saw for myself behind the scenes look at the Hunter Biden hard drive. So she is claiming that she saw it. Don't know for sure. Drugs, underage obsessions, power deals. Druggy Hunter makes Anthony Weiner's down under selfie addiction look normal. So again, I think she's trying to paint a picture. She's doing it in reasonably colorful language. There's a lot, and I agree, that the whole Biden family does have some explaining to do. Apologizing, I think it's way too late for. I honestly think with the number of lies that have been told, I think it's explaining at this point, and I don't think apology is really going to go far enough to undo the number of lies, it seems, that they've told. Now, everyone calls Trump a liar, and some of the things he typically exaggerates. I want to say most of the stuff people seem to say that he claims to lie about is usually exaggeration, right? Or it's usually bringing something up about, well, you can put bleach and you inject bleach. And it's like, well, he said inject disinfectant was the actual word he used. But still, it's usually stuff like that. Now, yes, Trump totally exaggerates, no question about it. Biden straight up lies. He talks about how there's 100 million people that are going to lose their health care he makes numbers up. And I don't think is that many people that are on the Obamacare. There's certainly not 100 million people that have pre-existing conditions. So he tends to make numbers up, and I think it's because his memory's a little toast sometimes. I mean, there was just the other day, someone was asking him a question, and they quoted 56% of voters believe that they're better off today than they were 4 years ago. And he goes, 54% of voters? Really? Like, I was like, dude, that was like a second ago. They just said 56. And your dementia's already forgotten it, man. Like, people can say, no, he's fine. Literally, it's like not even 5 seconds had passed, and he's already forgotten the number. So it's got to make you wonder a little. I mean, again, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. So again, Chanel Rion is stating, I just saw for myself, yada, yada, yada. So again, one of the things that really kind of jumped out, at least from Q at this point, underage obsessions is a gentle way of putting it. So maybe there are a lot of photos or a lot of evidence to suggest that Hunter was involved with maybe some prostitution type stuff, and maybe some of these were underage women. We don't know. Again, that's the speculation, it seems, that we're pulling from this slide. But again, remember, it's just a conspiracy, like they say, right? It's just a conspiracy theory. So that's why they're so freaked out about it. That's why there's actually a congressional thing coming out about QAnon. That's why they are starting to bring up how crazy QAnon is. That's why, literally, my friend just today was asking me about QAnon. And he's on the left. He's hardcore on the left. And he's heard a lot of the talking points from the left. And he was asking me very poignant questions about what I think QAnon is. And he was hitting me up with, that they're all child molesters. And I'm like, no. And I tried to explain to him that really Q doesn't talk about that as much as there's some assumptions, there's some possible human trafficking for sure. And I think that's been going on for years. I mean, that's not anything new. There's been a lot of talk about it, and that's certainly something Trump has campaigned on and certainly spoken a lot about and trying to stop human trafficking. So there's a lot of that. It doesn't necessarily just focus on kids, and it really seldom ever does. But there are concerns. Now, when you think about some of the creepy videos of Biden, I mean, if any of you have ever looked up Creepy Joe, I mean, literally, just Google Creepy Joe and look for the images and videos. You will see crazy pictures of him sniffing all sorts of people's hair. You'll see him groping and grabbing. Even there's a video of him holding on to Hillary Clinton, and it looks like he's touching her in a pretty inappropriate place and just won't let go. And she's just like, she even grabs his hands at some point and starts laughing uncomfortably. Like, it's a weird moment to watch. So it's strange kind of how things get spun. But whatever the case is, they're obviously trying to shut down the discussion from the other side of this, which I think is still, I think we need to discuss stuff. We need to talk about things. That's the only way anything's ever going to get any better. Post 4880, without you collectively, there would have been no way to bypass their control. They weren't about to repeat the mistakes of 2016. You are what matters most. That's you. You. Right there. Just you. Singular. You matter. And again, united together, you and me, united we are not divided. And united we are very strong. So you awake thinking for yourself is their greatest fear. They don't like people that question what they're told. They don't like people that question the narrative. They want you to take what they say as fact and don't question it. But the problem is there's a lot of very intelligent people on the other side of the spectrum and that truly just don't believe in the general narrative. Doesn't even mean they're politically affiliated. They could be apolitical like myself. I am apolitical. I know I'm pretty pro-Trump. You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But I'm definitely not happy with the deep state. And there's no question about that in my mind. And to me, a majority, at least, of the deep state swamp is currently on the left. And there's Mitt Romney, McCain was one of them. Like there's definitely some swamp creatures on the right. So I don't want anyone to think that there's not. I mean, even in Trump's current administration, Ray is questionable, right? There's still some blockers that are floating around. So again, when we're awake, that freaks them out. So again, welcome to the digital battlefield. That's the way the game is played these days, right? It's all about information. It's all about the narrative. And the narrative used to completely be controlled by the news media. No longer. And that is one thing that they did not, I guess, understand or expect or see coming or didn't see it was going to be as big a deal as it was or felt that they'd be able to censor it through bully tactics. Hard to say what the intention or thought was, but it failed miserably because here we are right now and 18 days out from the election and there's a lot of discussion going around these different points. Now, a couple interesting news stories that popped up. GOP files an FEC complaint against Twitter over the blocking of Hunter Biden's stories, that article. They blocked that New York Post article. There is GOP just literally are filing an FEC complaint. That is a huge step towards getting those with the 305 or that little section in there that they're not publishers. So again, and that's going to be weird. Folks, if that happens, if they lose that protection and then they can censor regardless, so that's going to change a lot of these platforms for sure. If they try to get them back to understanding, hey, Twitter, you need to just be a publisher and stop trying to be the police as far as what's right, wrong, and what's correct and not. I mean, Zuckerberg actually, I hate to admit it, but I think he was correct when he said, I don't think we should be the arbiters of truth. And I agree. I don't think that Facebook should. Facebook should be a platform where everybody can say whatever. You can say whatever. And then have people debate it amongst themselves. Now, if they're being mean to each other and making threats, that's a totally different story, which a lot of people seems to be the way to argue these days. I mean, back when I was younger, if you went to someone's face and said half the stuff that people say to each other online, but if you said that to someone's face, dude, that didn't work out well for you. You learned not to say certain things to certain people, right? You just learned. You learned it was likely going to involve some pain for yourself if you did that, right? So what's funny is that doesn't exist anymore in this digital world. People can say some of the most horrible things. I remember the first video I did on this channel, and I went and looked at the comments, and like the second comment I read was someone wishing death to me and my family. I was just like, wow. Like I get you don't agree with me. Wow. And literally at that point, I'm like, I'm not reading comments. I mean, screw it. It's not worth it. So again, there's some crazy people out there that say really, really horrible things. Now, quickly on another right scoop story here, but Biden's ABC town hall voters, and they put it in quotes because these were voters that hadn't made up their mind or whatever the heck. But two of these voters were a former Obama speechwriter, and they were known, and the wife of a former high-profile Dem candidate. So again, two of these voters that were asking Biden softball questions definitely have affiliations to the left. There's no question about it. So, it is what it is. I'm not trying to say anything. See if we got any fresh posts. Nope, 4880 is the most current post, and it's managed to stay there for a while. We're going to keep our tabs and eyes and ears open. I'm expecting way more information to drip out about Hunter Biden. I will say one of the key things, and I know for a fact is going on right now, they're dripping out a little information, and then they're waiting to see. And I honestly, there's a lot of people that say Biden should respond. I disagree. I think Biden's wise right now to not respond. And here's why. Because I think he knows, I think his handlers at least, are smart enough to understand what is happening right now. And what is happening right now is they're waiting or hoping Biden or anyone in his administration says something crazy that says this isn't true, it's absurd, it's asinine, there's no way, this was debunked already. And there's been people who have been saying that. And then what then follows up, and they know this is coming, Giuliani's got more documents queued up. He's got more emails queued up. More information is going to be going to the New York Post, the Washington Times, what other articles, don't know. But these exclusive pieces of news are getting out, and they're going to get out in different locations. And by having different sources of the information, it actually starts to give, again, more credibility to the big picture, because now you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 news agencies talking about it. So then it starts to become harder for people like Twitter to ban people because it's being talked about in so many places. And that is part of what's going on right now. This push for censorship is really a tough avenue for the left, the deep state, because it's obvious what's happening. It's very one-sided. Most people can see it. I mean, the crazy Russia collusion, the fact that they can still say Russia about Orange Man bad constantly, even though there's still no evidence to suggest it. They tried to impeach him, but no real evidence ever came. It was all about that one phone call to the Ukraine. He didn't get impeached for Russia. He got impeached for a phone call where they claimed he did quid pro quo, and it was pretty bad. And then you've got Biden basically saying you don't get $1 billion unless you stop investigating Burisma, who his son happened to be aboard on, and from what Tucker Carlson's telling us, who a month to the day earlier asked Pops for some help. And he got it. So there's a lot of questions that definitely need to be answered. Apologies? No, way too late for that. Questions? Yes. And again, I'm curious to see if they do open their mouth and try to say anything, or if Biden actually, and I know it's hard to say his name and smart in the same sentence, but I'm about to. But if Biden's smart enough to keep his mouth shut until they drip out more information and just, because they're basically going to hand it to him, if you know what I mean. Like they're going and so he needs to cautiously move forward on this, or else he is truly going to be done. I mean, if it comes out and he's just blatantly lying, and then some proof comes out, and then the FBI can even verify that this source is in fact real, and that is something we need for sure. So again, few things have to happen in order for this to really get legs. But and again, the timing, 18 days before the election. I mean, it's tied together. Of course it is. Duh, right? I mean, that is what we're up against right now. It's an information warfare. Biden has essentially got gobs and gobs of cash. So he's doing ad buys all over the place, which thank you, sir, because this is a great time of year for the companies I work for and many similar type companies. Things to keep in mind. Let's watch out, guys. Let's keep our minds open to the information that's out there. Let's keep our minds open to the possibilities of what's actually been happening to us. Let's be aware that our freedoms are being attacked. They're talking about packing the courts. Biden's playing around with that. He's saying, we're waiting to see what happens with Coney Barrett. Ultimately, Coney Barrett's going to get voted in probably next week. By the end of next week, it's very likely, or the week after. I think they're expecting the vote to be in by the end of the month. If that happens, Biden's then probably going to come out with something along the lines of possibly court packing. But again, he's holding that back also because he knows he's got a divided side. The left, you've got the ultra progressive, they want the court packing, and then you've got the central left, normal Democrats, normal liberal people that don't and realize that's a dangerous, horrible slope. So again, this is going to be exciting over the next 18 days, folks. That's all I can promise you. We're going to keep bringing you as much news as I can. I'm going to keep trying to inform you with as many stories as I can. And certainly, as more posts happen, we're going to do our best to share those with you as well. Where we go one, we go all. It's on the Fringe with Dan Radio Style.